Following his big speech last night, Bernie Sanders reiterated again this morning at a smaller meeting the importance of unifying behind Hillary Clinton, especially against Donald Trump. And like last night, this morning, he got some boos, and here was his response.
Defeat Donald Trump and elect Hillary Clinton. But it is harder to look your kids in the face who would be living under a Donald Trump.
So over the past day, we've heard a couple different versions of this sort of argument. Some of them have been better received than others. You had Sarah Silverman last night saying to the Bernie or Bust crowd, you're being ridiculous. They absolutely hated that. They didn't like the small little reference that Michelle Obama made. And even Bernie last night got some boos. But, you know, it's easy to boo, but it's harder to look your kids in the face if we're living under a Trump presidency. Like, he understands what the stakes are, and people don't like the focus being on Trump, some of the people who were big Bernie supporters previously, and yet the stakes do exist. And I understand that we have to sort of finesse the language there. Joe Biden today said they should be allowed to grieve if they want to boo a little bit, if they want to do that. Like, that's part of the process. I think that was a smarter way of addressing it. But, I mean, Bernie Sanders, if anybody understands his movement, it should be him. And I personally think that he's been doing a great job of being an ambassador to those people.
I spoke to the Clinton camp today, and off the record, they indicated that they were surprised to find out how much more reasonable Bernie Sanders' campaign is than Bernie Sanders supporters. Now, that's obviously their perspective, so your perspective might be completely different. What are you talking about? Bernie Sanders supporters are perfectly reasonable. But I think what they're saying there is Sanders has done all he can. He really is. He's given it A+ for effort in trying to corral his supporters to go, okay, but remember, Trump is worse. And remember, we got all these concessions. Remember, these are real progressive priorities that we wanted that she's now agreed to. Let's go, guys, let's go. But that's the dynamic that I think a lot of people in the party still don't understand. A lot of people in the media don't understand. These supporters are independent-minded. So even if Bernie Sanders himself, the first word in Bernie or Bust, says, hey, you go ahead and support Hillary Clinton, they're not necessarily going to do it. I mean, look at the clip we just showed you. Is not the first day. It's not the first thing. You know, the booing Debbie Wasserman Schultz is one thing. Booing when Bernie Sanders mentioned Hillary Clinton the first time at his own delegate gathering yesterday is one thing. On the floor was a third thing. And then we thought, okay, all right, Bernie Sanders gave the speech at the convention, brought people together. And no, they're still booing. It's going to be much, much harder than people realize.
Yeah, I think, look, I've said this on the show before. I just want to reiterate. Those who support Bernie Sanders as aggressively as they do, don't do it because they like him as a person. Yeah, that's just the cherry on top. They do like him as a person. He's charismatic. He would be a good leader. But what they like about him more than anything else is the ideas that he portrayed, or are the ideas that he portrayed. And so if he is endorsing a candidate that does not believe in those same ideas or wouldn't represent those same ideas, they're not going to vote for her regardless of what Bernie Sanders pushes them to do. Now, the question is, you know, how many of his voters feel that way? And there's various polls that say various things. And I'm worried about what kind of impact that's going to have on the general election.
And let me just add one more thing to that that's really important. I think that there's a difference between supporting and voting for. So if you ask those Bernie Sanders supporters, are you going to get behind Hillary? You're going to get a much different answer, and it's going to be largely no, than if you ask them, are you going to vote for her? Then that might be, I think, still a majority of Bernie Sanders supporters, maybe a very comfortable majority saying, yes, I'll vote for her.
Yeah.
But you can't get me to support her. Those are two different things.
Yeah, and it also goes in the opposite direction, too. We throw around the term Bernie Sanders supporters for people who like him, might have donated to him, all the way up to are deeply and passionately in love with him. We still use that term supporters for that. And look, we sometimes will think about a story that we're gonna do, and then we realize that people being mad on Twitter doesn't necessarily represent what it seems like it does. And look, the people that he was talking to this morning are his delegates. Like, there's no one less representative, and that's not a diss against them. They're passionate for a reason. They've been involved in this entire process, but they're obviously not like most voters. No one is going to be more passionately in support of Bernie Sanders than the people who are literally coming here paying thousands of their own dollars so that they can cast a vote for him. So we can't take from that and say that represents everybody.
Right, well, that's true. I mean, the context of this is a really important thing. You spoke to someone with the Clinton campaign. I spoke to someone with the Clinton campaign, someone with the DNC, and someone with Sanders campaign. As a matter of fact, I just came from talking to someone downstairs on the high-ranking person in the Sanders campaign, who said to me that, at this point, we showed up on the scene to disrupt, but we didn't show up on this scene to disrupt. And that's what Bernie says. In other words, that they came into this race, into this presidential race, to disrupt what was the norm of this presidential race. It didn't work, and now they're disappointed that the disruption has continued here, but they also feel like it's had its run, and it's run its course, and that after this roll call vote, that will be the end of it at the convention.
But one other thing that I think is important, though, is you mentioned, like, they follow Bernie Sanders, but just because Bernie Sanders says to support her, that doesn't mean that they're going to, which is totally true. But Bernie Sanders, in his speech in this morning, does not say support her because I'm telling you to. He's laying out the policy reasons why you should support her, the similarities that he has with Hillary Clinton. He acknowledges, and he did in his speech last night, that there are significant differences on some key issues that he's continuing to push for in the platform, even right now, probably through the general election. But at the same time, he is stressing the similarities, not simply bow down to me, I am your God.
Yeah.
That's true. One more thing. Also, they should not listen to Bernie Sanders. If Bernie Sanders says support Hillary Clinton, vote for her, if they don't want to, they shouldn't have to. It's not the cult of Sanders. It's the candidacy of Sanders. It's this revolution. They're not bound to listen to Bernie Sanders. That's the beauty of it. I mean, it's disappointing to a lot of Democrats who see beating Donald Trump as the much more important thing here, more important than a revolution or a candidacy. But they don't have to. They can disrupt. They can do whatever they want. They don't have to vote for him.
So it is always really interesting when the primaries are over and the candidate that loses or doesn't get the nomination usually comes out and endorses the person that they lost to. And I remember in 2008 when we were at the conventions together, Cenk, you and I were having a discussion about Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And Hillary Clinton was, at that point, finally endorsing Barack Obama. And it really rubbed me the wrong way, even though I was an Obama supporter at the time, because it all seemed so fake to me, right? They had just had this vicious primary season where they're attacking one another. She was attacking him very aggressively. And then to come out and say, you must vote for Barack Obama. He is the candidate for you. It just seemed disingenuous, even though, I feel like they've worked out some of their differences and they're actually way more similar than we knew at the time. So right now, I feel like that feeling I had in 2008 has only been amplified, 10 times for a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, because think about the way the primaries went down and think about how vicious Hillary's camp was to Bernie Sanders, painting them all as Bernie bros, making it seem as though they're all these sexist wild animals. I can understand why people are upset. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. So, last couple of thoughts here. So, you're right, Anna. The reason it seemed disingenuous is because it is. So, either Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's differences were hyped up and pumped up in a disingenuous way back in 2008, or their unity was hyped up and pumped up in a disingenuous way. I happen to think in that race that it was their differences that were hyped up. Mm-hmm. They actually were very similar. And so now in this race, they're not very similar, Sanders and Clinton. And so it would seem really fake if all of a sudden you glossed it over. But Bernie Sanders didn't last night in his speech. He said, we still have a lot of differences, but it's okay. That doesn't mean you should vote for Trump. Okay, so now that then leads to the idea of this unity doesn't have to be forced down everybody's throat. So everybody's like, you gotta be unified right now. Just calm down for a second. Let them vent a little bit. Let them debate a little bit. In fact, they should have had more floor debates. If they had, that would have been a healthy way to vent some of those, not just frustrations, but ideas. And it would have been more democratic, and it would have been better than just forcing a vent, trying to bottle it all up, and then it just comes out as booze and dissatisfaction, etc. And look, if you ask me what should Sanders do going forward after the convention, I think he should actually still make all the same speeches he used to. He should have the same rallies he used to. I know that that'll seem totally foreign. The Clinton people would think Operation Stolen Thunder, don't do that. But what he should do is same speech, and at the end, a quarter of the speech, he should talk about, hey, you know, Clinton agrees with this, this, and this of what I just said, and Trump disagrees with everything I just said.
Yeah.
And you know what that would be? That would be genuine, and it would actually be really helpful to Hillary Clinton.